I'm from Maui, so we moved here a long time ago. We're from the Big Island, but we were in Honolulu. Two of my three children were born there, and then we came here. See, yeah, I moved my mom because my mom was living on the she's not by herself. Something happened, so I moved my mom here. So then she came here. She met your mom and everybody else. He's waiting.
Okay, I'll start the music video, and then after the music video,
okay, got it. Yeah, I was. Do I look like I just came out of the kitchen?
Oh, the family's so dear, yeah. Let's just sit together.
Good evening. My name is Lois Nishikawa and I will be your MC this evening. So welcome to Makawao Honganji Hatsubon Firstborn Memorial Services for 2024. Thanking you in advance for either silencing your cell phone or turning it off. Thank you. Hatsubon service is a special memorial service held in memory of loved ones lost during the past year since the last Obon. For the family and friends of the departed loved ones, Hatsubon Firstborn Memorial Service is a precious opportunity to reflect upon the continued influence of our departed loved ones and to express our gratitude for their being part of our lives. Reverend Kerry will officiate today's service, which begins with the invocation San Wu Jo, the three respectful callings.
We respectfully call upon the Tathagata Amida, the Tathagata Shakyamuni, the Tathagatas of the 10 directions, to enter this place of practice, joyfully scattering flowers of love. Namo.
Reverend Kerry will now lead the chanting of Amida Kyo, the Sutra on the Buddha Amida, one of the 3 Pure Land Sutra in the Jodo Shinshu Honganji tradition, after performing the Toraiban ritual, ascending to the ceremonial dais. Toraiban ritual is performed for major services and includes the 3 kneeling bows, the most formal bow in Honganji tradition, anointing robes and vestments with powdered incense, the offering of incense 2 times by the priest, the only time you'll see this. After the sutra chanting, Reverend Kerry will perform Goraiban, ritual for descending the ceremonial dais. During the sutra chanting, the names of each hatsubon memorial will be read aloud. For those attending here in person, family and friends of each departed loved one are encouraged to come up to the front of the hall to offer incense as a gesture of respect and an expression of gratitude. Please feel free to use any of the 3 incense burners at the front of the hall. For those of you joining the service online, please reflect upon the influence of the departed loved one in your life and express gratitude in a way that is most appropriate for you. After the hatsubon families and friends have offered incense, we invite all other attendees to offer incense in the memory of their loved ones. If you are not able to come up to the front, please raise your hand and a portable incense burner will be brought to you at your seat. First, on memorial, hatsubon services in the memory of the late Mr. Thomas Kiyoshi Imoto. Buddhist name, Shakusho Shin, born into the Pure Land on August 28, 2019. The late Mr. John Yutaka Kawakawa, Buddhist name, Shakunen Ho, born into the Pure Land on July 30, 2021. The late Mr. Warren Teruni Nishida, Buddhist name Shakuko A, born into the Pure Land on June 25, 2023. The late Mr. Haruo Kamitani, Buddhist name Shaku Hokai, born into the Pure Land on August 3, 2023. The late Mrs. Shirley Takahashi, Buddhist name Shakuji Ko, born into the Pure Land on September 25, 2023. The late Mr. Kiyoshi Kazui John Fukushima, Buddhist name Shaku Jo Myo, born into the Pure Land on October 7, 2023. The late Mrs. Florence Sakai, Buddhist name Shakuzen Yu, born into the Pure Land on January 8, 2024. The late Mrs. Hanako Doris Hashimoto, Buddhist name Shakuni Kyo, born into the Pure Land on January 17, 2024. The late Mr. Ralph Katsuji Sakamura, Buddhist name Shakushoshin, born into the Pure Land on April 6, 2024. The late Mrs. Lorene DeCoit, Buddhist name Shakuni Kosei, born into the Pure Land on April 26, 2024. Representing the Makawao Honganji Mission Temple Council President Mrs. Karen Ishizu. The Reverend Kerry will now read the English translation of The Letter on White Ashes, which was written by Renryo Shonin, the 8th Monchu chief priest of the Honganji in the 15th century.
Deeply contemplating the transient nature of life, Nothing is more fleeting than our journey through this world. It is as an all too short dream. Has anyone lived 10,000 years? Life swiftly passes, and how many have lived for even 100 years? Whether I go before others, or whether others go before me, whether it is to be today, or whether it is to be tomorrow, who is to know? Those who are sent off before us are as countless as the fragile drops of dew. Though in the morning we may be radiant with health, in the evening we may be white ashes. When the winds of impermanence blow, our eyes are closed forever. As we breathe our last breath, our face loses its color. Our loved ones gather and lament, but to no avail. The body is then carried out to an open field and disappears in smoke, which smolders through the night, leaving only white ashes. Is there any expression for such a sad plight? This fragile nature of human existence underlies both the young and old, and we should, therefore, all the sooner turn our hearts to the singularly important matter of true and real life. We should recite the Nembutsu upon having completely entrusted all that we are to the Buddha Amida. In gratitude, we acknowledge these words humbly and respectfully. Humbly and respectfully. Anakashiko. Anakashiko.
Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Reverend Ronald Kobata. Reverend Ron Kobata is a Tokudo ordained priest and certified teacher Kyoshi in the Jodo Shinshu Honganji Ha tradition. Reverend Kobata has served temples in Hawaii and the mainland USA, including Makawao Honganji from 2001 to 2004, Kahui Honganji and Hawaii Betsuin. Reverend Kobata retired from ministry in 2020. Reverend?
Aloha. Good evening, good day, good life. Thank Reverend Carey for giving me this opportunity to stand in this place with you to observe this year's Makawao Honganji hatsubon. So, but you sure now, he told me that I could use the same talk for 2 nights because there's a different group of folks coming. Is that correct? I mean, I thought you read the whole list. So I was expecting it would be half the list tonight and the other half tomorrow night. So is there a change of plans?
Okay.
Oh, I'm okay. Oh, thank you for telling me I'm okay. But, yeah, and then I'm going to have to ask for Sensei's help because I'm not a tech person at all. I mean, all this equipment here is so impressive, but I don't want to abuse it by doing something incorrect or... Okay, so you'll be my guide?
Yeah, so you don't have to change the slides using the iPad.
Oh, okay, so I don't have to... Yeah, Portland, I help out at a temple in Portland even though I'm retired, but they don't have a resident minister, so I'm just filling in on occasion. And they have this kind of equipment too, and they hand me a clicker. So I'm supposed to click it whenever I want to change the slide, but I always forget to do that because it's not my conditioning. But anyway, I'm very relieved to hear that Sensei said he'll take care of all that. So
just give me a signal to change the slides.
okay, where are we? Oh, okay. So, slide number 1. Okay, so you'll notice it says Howa. So as some of you might be aware, that's the Japanese term that we translate into English as Dharma talk. Ho is Dharma and Hwa is talk. So they came up with the English expression Dharma talk in lieu of what some people refer to as a sermon. But I decided I'm going to come up with a different expression. So as you'll note, it says, what? SOB story. So I decided I'm going to give SOB stories. Okay, but do you know what the SOB stands for? This SOB? No. No, it stands for, in my uses of that, is sense of being. Stories that give us a sense of being alive. And then we would say in Japanese, okage samade. So that's why we listen to the Dharma, to be able to develop that sense of being alive by virtue of all the innumerable causes and conditions that have made our life possible. So it kind of fits this theme that I see. I guess Reverend Carey came up with that little slogan, just say mahalo. Okay, well that was his specialty, or that was his career, right? Come up with slogans and catchphrases and things to market stuff. So here he is now marketing Jodo Shinshu with all these little phrases. But anyway, so the sense of being alive is how I hope we can appreciate the Dharma. To hear the Dharma is to awaken in us, we call it, a sense of being alive in gratitude. And as you probably recognize, most of the gatherings we have at the temple are considered to be gatherings in appreciation for all the causes and conditions. And the Obon is a unique tradition that we've adopted or been taught to celebrate the fact of those who have preceded us and to acknowledge our deep, profound sense of indebtedness to those who have preceded us as an annual observance. But this is an interesting thing to consider because I took a pilgrimage to India this past fall, and we went to various Buddhist sites, and you know, there were lectures or talks given, and they're talking about Moggallana. So you recall who Moggallana was? You know, it was the legends associated with that disciple of Shakyamuni that we associate with Obon. You know, where he saw, he reflected, and realized that his recently deceased mom was in the realm of the hungry ghost, suffering from all of the kinds of attachments that she developed as from being a mom. And so he was so horrified by that. He was asking Shakyamuni for some advice as to how to alleviate his mother's suffering in the realm of the hungry ghost. And then the legend has it that he was advised to practice dana, to share with others. And then, in being able to do that, he had the vision of his mother being liberated from that state of the hungry ghost. And that's where he and his fellow disciples began to dance for joy. Okay, right? That's the whole poem dance history. But it was interesting because when I was in India, they never mentioned that. You know, so I was curious about that, and I started thinking and, you know, reading more, and then realized that the Obon tradition more or less developed in China. As Buddhism entered China, basically, they had to adapt because of the religion that was already established in China at the time was what? Anyone know Asian history, culture? Well, it's called Confucianism, was the major religious tradition. And Confucianism is basically the sense of indebtedness to our elders, to our teachers and so forth, our families. So they didn't want this new religion coming in, so they started making some objections about how the legend about Siddhartha abandoning his family to seek enlightenment. So they were critical of Buddhism because, what kind of religion is this that you abandon your family? And so Buddhism having to adapt, just like it's adapting here in the West. We're doing things different here that don't happen in Japan, even though we think it's a Japanese form of Buddhism. No, Buddhism's more adaptable than that. It's not an ethnic tradition. It's a way of understanding and appreciating life. But anyway, so that idea of Buddhism having to adapt and try to respond to Confucianism when they began to incorporate certain perspectives that we might even call ancestor worship, meaning to appreciate one's lineage and have that sense of respect. And maybe it was around that Obon began to develop. But then when it got to Japan, it became pretty much institutionalized as a major cultural observance. So that's the history. And interestingly, I don't know if you're familiar with Win Kiyama. He's originally from Big Island, but he had taught and he does research at different universities on mainland. And while right now his focus in retirement, somewhat retirement, is focusing on the history of Obon in the West, the Bon dance. And so one of the things he looked up for me, because I was curious when coming to Makawao, when did this start in Hawaii? Because on the mainland, the continental United States, there's a clear history of Obon Odori starting in the 1930s. There was a Reverend Iwanaga who intentionally brought some young folks together to teach them folk dancing, we call Obon Odori. And that was the origins of Obon Odori on the mainland. But in Hawaii, Dr. Kiyama found out that there were articles in 1905 addressing or talking about the local bone dances that were going on at the time. So Hawaii history is much longer, richer, and in some respects unique compared to the continental United States Buddhist groups. The main difference is, does anyone know the difference? The main difference between how Obon is observed in Hawaii versus in the mainland temples? Well, basically, mainland temples, the only temple, Buddhist, Japanese-based origin, Buddhist temples were in the Honganji tradition. They were the only ones that had Obon Odori. The other denominations, I don't know what happened, but they never got into it, or somehow it didn't develop. Whereas here, because I remember when I first came here, I was kind of blown away to learn that the Bon season goes from June to August. Because in Japan, it's basically either the middle of July or the middle of August, depending on which region of Japan you're from. But the idea of going all summer long is a uniquely Hawaiian Buddhist tradition, meaning that each denomination conduct their own celebrations. So that's why they have to stretch it out so they don't have these temples fighting each other about who's going to get their gathering when. Well, we still fight about it, but anyway. Yes, I guess some temples have a preference of which weekends they like. But anyway, so that's a reflection of the fact that things change. So the customs that we follow, we talk about it as tradition. as if it's something that's always been and always has to be a certain way. But that's not a very Buddhistic way of looking at life, because we recognize everything changes. So that's the whole idea of the obon anyway. But on this occasion, I thought maybe reintroduce. I'm sure I must have given this talk before, but I'm hoping that you've forgotten it, so I can. But I call it, on the mainland, in the BCA, I call it my Hawaii story. Are we there yet? Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped ahead. I skipped the introduction, which is a reading of a passage from a classic Shin Buddhist text called Tanisho. In English, we call it A Record in Lament of Divergences. So the English translation of that text, and it begins, the first chapter and the first paragraph is the one that I placed, that's on the screen. So I'll recite that for you. Alive with the inconceivable working of Amida's vow, I shall realize birth in the Pure Land. The moment you entrust yourself thus to the vow, so that the mind set upon saying the Nembutsu arises within you, you are immediately brought to share in the benefit of being grasped by Amida, never to be abandoned. Namo Amidas. Namo Amidas. So this was the opening quote that the author of that text selected to begin this whole text. It's a very small text, but anyway. But those of you who are familiar with it, do you notice any differences than the version that's in the collected works of Shinran? Have you gotten into that yet? Oh, okay. Well, anyway, the traditional, I'll call it Orthodox English translation that is in the collected works of Shinran uses the expression saved by the working, the inconceivable working of Amida's vow. So I substituted alive with saved. Because I'm thinking, I guess that's our job, right, to try to come up with expressions that maybe make the teachings accessible to oneself and to share that with others. So saved has certain connotation, but I thought maybe try alive. And so in place of enlightenment, I like to think in terms of to come alive. That's what awakening entails, to have a sense of coming alive. But that term, alive, I'll go into a little later, but is an acronym, okay? But jumping back to where we're trying to start, the Hawaii story. I call it the Hawaii story because I heard it here. I think I was still at Kahului then, but one of the members there, when they told me the story that he had heard from some of the local folks, and the story goes, a local guy was sitting at the Inner Island Terminal in Honolulu, waiting to catch a flight back to, not to catch a flight back to Maui. And he happened to overhear a conversation behind him. And he heard one person turn to the next saying, I came to Hawaii to die. And so the local guy kind of got shook up, hearing this statement. And so he said he leaned over to try to find out, what was going on. And then as he listened, it dawned on him that he had overheard a visitor that had just arrived from Australia. So coming from Australia, we say what? He speaks with an Australian accent. So he was saying, in our pronunciation, oh, you already got it. You've been to Australia? I came to Hawaii today. But the way it comes out, it came out. to die. So the local guy heard what he heard, and the visitor said what he said, but obviously it wasn't a mistranslation. It was just a different way of expression and hearing. And so that's what we are made to be aware of, is how we are conditioned. Right? We all have our unique experiences, and that influences how we hear things, how we see things, how we feel about things. And so we have these filters of our own experience, which basically we're interpreting what's going on around us. And so that's part of awakening. But then, thinking about that, in a religious sense, from a Buddhist approach, I would say, we were born to die. To die to the ego, the notion of me, myself, and I, as an independent, unchanging entity unto myself. But to die, in the spiritual sense, as we call it, to be reborn, or awakened, or to come alive. Two, our oneness with immeasurable life, nam wami damus, in gratitude. That's the tradition that we're a part of. And it's not a dogma, it's just a sense of being aware of this very precious moment in eternity we experience as our life. Because it's the moment we have that sense of being alive, we'll then be able to appreciate this change we call death. We refer to it as being reborn in the Pure Land of enlightenment. But as you may have heard or understood, Pure Land isn't the final destination, right? We don't go to Pure Land and bliss out for eternity. We go to the Pure Land to awaken, to become Buddhas. And as a result of that transformation, we're naturally, spontaneously drawn back to the world of suffering to help and guide others. And that's why we could see Obon with that spirit of our predecessors, our ancestors returning to guide and encourage us to our own awakening, our own sense of coming alive to the oneness of our life in gratitude. So that's the basic Hawaii story. But going to the acronym ALIVE. Okay, there it is. So this is something I started doing when I was at the San Francisco Temple. It came about because I started getting tired of the, well, you know the acronym of GAS, right? You're not familiar with that? I mean, that's kind of a classic. That was one of the first acronyms I remember learning or hearing about. That represents what we call the three poisons. GAS, greed, anger, stupidity, or ignorance. And so, we use that a lot. We still use it. I'm thinking, well, that's kind of a negative thing, so I thought maybe let's come up with some new acronyms. So I got really fixated with that acronym. So I started trying to come up with different kinds of acronyms. And so one of the first ones actually is ALIVE. A-L-I-V-E. Aware, loving, inspired, valued, engaged. So aware. Basic Buddhism is awareness. Awareness of what? The Dharma, the truth, the reality of life, which is what? Impermanence and interdependence. That's all. I shouldn't say that's all, that's it. Impermanence, things are always changing, never staying the same. That's not a belief or a dogma that you gotta believe. It's something if we're aware enough, we begin to realize it. I mean, I'm sure my hair wasn't this gray when I was here. and other kind of changes that have happened to me physically, even mentally. But, so things are always changing. That's just, that's physics, science. Everything is in a state of change. They call it entropy. Things are always changing, never staying the same. And it's on that basis then, the Buddha realized that therefore, everything exists interdependently. Nothing, no one exists alone. Everything comes into being interdependently. So that's the basic awareness. And from that awareness, we begin to realize or have a sense of love, which is a sense of connection with everything and everyone around us. Love is basically connection. Then, with that, there's the inspiration of life. The inspiration. And inspiration, you might, or inspire, you might recall, comes from the word what? Spirit. Spirit. And it comes from what? Breath. The breath. And by the way, since there's I could maybe, I was thinking I should try to get myself corrected because I happened to be looking through this tourist book at the place we're staying at, and it had a vocabulary and it mentioned aloha. And aloha in that book was defined as alo is open or face. See, when I was here, I thought I learned it as the breath of God, or the breath of life. Aloha is breath. But so I'm not clear about what alo represents. But aloha, the breath of life. And you think about basic meditation is what? Paying attention to your breath. And to have that sense of receiving the breath. Because it's nothing we create, nothing we control. It's something we receive that gives us life. That's the first thing they check with the newborn, the ability to breathe. So the breath of life is that sense of inspiration. And it's interesting to think about how in Hawaiian culture that expression, the breath of life, aloha. And in Japanese, are you familiar with the term for to live? What's the Japanese word to live? Anyone? Nobody? Okay, it's ikiru. Ikiru. And that can be broken down into iki or suru. Iki is to breathe. To breathe is to live. And in German, it was fascinating when I first learned that the term for breath is what? Anyone knows some German? The German term for breath is atmen. Atmen. That's a Sanskrit word for being. So I don't know how it ended up in Germany, but they adopted atmen for breath. So in these different cultures, the universal experience of life is based upon the sense of breath. Again, nothing we create, nothing we figure out, we only receive. And from that sense of realizing what we receive, we begin to value our life. We come to value this moment in eternity because as we look at it, it's the connection to immeasurable life. Namu is the finite beings that we are, who are awakened by Amida, immeasurable light and life, in oneness. And that's where that oneness, to me, means to be engaged, to have that sense of being connected to the world around us. Not only the world, but the universe that we're all a part of. And that's the sense of awakening to living a life of gratitude, or I just shared with Reverend Carey, so I'll give you a, what do you call it, heads up. He said, I'm going to use that. So another acronym is MAHALO. MAHALO, M-A-H-A-L-O. Mindfully aware how appreciation links oneness. So appreciation is basically having that sense of connection, of gratitude to the oneness of our life that we share with all beings. And so, to conclude, this is a verse, or a saying that I read in a book someplace, and it's a quote by, it's a quote of a Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman. Has anyone ever heard of this person? Okay, you're shaking your head, so how do you know Dr. Thurman? Oh, I thought you were shaking your head. Okay, so, what? Oh no, you're thinking of not Robert Thurman. He's the Tibetan Buddhist scholar. That's very close with the Dalai Lama. No, Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman, I learned, was the mentor to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He was a spiritual mentor to Dr. King. And he came to San Francisco, I understand, in the 30s to establish a church there, which is still there. It's called the Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples. But anyway, this is a quote of Dr. Thurman that I thought was so connected to this sense of being alive. Because this is how it goes. Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and you'll do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. Namo Buddhas. Namo Buddhas. Namo Buddhas. He didn't say Namo Buddhas so in the same way we say it, but for my purposes, that was my response in reading this thought. To come alive. And so that's what we're here to do. We don't mourn per se those who have passed before us, but we definitely celebrate together the fact that we are by virtue of those who have preceded us. And that's this celebration in joy. Being alive together in the world of oneness. So to close now, my last acronym, Aloha, A-L-O-H-A, actively living, open-hearted awareness. Aloha. Namo Buddhas. Mahalo. Gracias, guten Tag, whatever works, Sheshe. Good night. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Reverend Tabata. Thank you for sharing your SOB stories with us. And don't worry about tomorrow night, because I know that most of these people will be back again. Because when we want to hear something and remember it, we're going to do it again and again. So they'll be back. Could you please stand and let's sing the Nembutsu, which is found on the screen.
Oh
makes you come alive, then go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. The wisdom of the Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman, who lived from 1899 to 1981.
Thank you. You may be seated. Well, this concludes Friday night's hatsubon service. On behalf of Makawao Honganji Mission, thank you to everyone who took the time out of your busy schedules to join us in person and via Zoom, observing this service in the memory of your departed loved ones. Thank you to Mr. Floyd Nagoshi for ringing the Kansho temple bell, and to Reverend Ron Kobata for his Dharma SOE stories. Announcements. I have one for hatsubon families that pre-ordered the delicious and most famous Makawao Honganji Chow Fan. You may pick up your order at the temple kitchen. Are there any other announcements? If not, thank you again for joining us this evening. You can see that we do have our festivities going on. I think the food concession will open at 6 and the Bon Odori will start at 7. So please enjoy this evening with us. Thank you very much. Mahalo.
Thank you.
So did you know Reverend Kobata from when he was in San Francisco? Oh.
Keep taking to Canada.
And then follow the walkway and then be a little bit to your left.
I thought maybe you ride your bike over here. Yeah. What's the difference? I have a big when I came out with it, and now you can go out this way rather than go out this way. You sure you don't need a light? How's your mom doing? Has it started? The food is out. 9 minutes. David. Okay. Uncle David. Then they came home.
He's going to sell the home. He's going to sell his home. September 19 or something like that. No, we went to
We go to the family.
so all my cousins from Chicago went over there. Out in checked in already? Right now the airport. Oh.
Last night it'd be like 12:30, 12:45.
It's not, I don't think it'll be crowded. I don't think 2 days. How long you staying even Matuguchi too. Chocolate. Excellent.
Here's your child. Social hall. Social hall. He's eaten there.
Are you still hungry? I'm just saying.
What did you say?
You said that's all? Okay.
They have and you gotta go teach them how to make chocolate. You gotta go teach them. LA guys. Another.
One of these days we're going to come back. That's why I asked if you were.
She got new hearing aids, $7,000. So she put the old one back, and now it works fine.
How funny.
Yeah,
So she can hear.
she can hear real good now.
Now what you going to do with the 7,000?
With 40-something days, you refund that. And they give you the old one. Funny, huh? It works.
I was wondering if you guys can just buy some food. I was thinking of some fun so that you can give them.